Welcome to the CCW Digital podcast series. This is Matt Wujak, CCW Digital writer and analyst, here with Dan Gingiss, best-selling author, Forbes contributor, and keynote speaker with more than 20 years of professional experience leading CX and social media in companies like McDonald's, Discover, and Humana. Dan, how's everything going?
It's great, Matt. I really appreciate you having me on, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Awesome. So I know you've been extremely busy lately with specifically the Experience Maker, which I'm sure a lot of people listening right now have heard a little bit about or have seen on LinkedIn. In the Experience Maker, you share simple yet practical and inexpensive ways to improve the customer experience and improve customer satisfaction scores, as well as social media engagement, which we'll get into a little bit later. But can you tell us a little bit about what you've been up to with the Experience Maker and how everything's going with it?
Sure. Well, the Experience Maker is my company name. It's my brand, and it's also a weekly live show that I host on LinkedIn and Periscope/Twitter. And the idea behind the Experience Maker is, I spent, as you mentioned in the intro, 20 years in corporate America at some big companies. And I felt like one of the keys to success was that I had become an experience maker at those companies, which meant that I was focused on the customer impact of every business decision. I wore the customer hat to all of my meetings and really tried to represent the customer in every engagement that I had. And I decided when I went off on my own in January of 2019 as a customer experience speaker and coach, that I wanted to train other people how to do that and how to become the experience maker at their businesses. And so hence the name. And then the weekly show is awesome because I get to interview really smart people who are already doing it at their companies and learn from them, because I believe that continuous learning is absolutely essential for all of us. And so I love to present content that isn't always just mine, that brings other voices in so that we can learn from each other and figure out what's working and what's not.
No, absolutely. And you hit on some great points in some of those episodes. I know myself as well as some of my colleagues have been following along, and we love some of the topics that you guys get into, and you guys bring on some great guests as well.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's I love doing interview shows. I mean, I had my first podcast that I did was an interview show where I talked with social media customer service teams, and I loved it. And then I went to a second podcast, which is still going. That's called Experience This, and that's actually not an interview show. It's intentionally not. It's each episode has 3 different segments, and we tell customer experience stories, and it's very positive with lots of takeaways. And so when I decided to start a video series, I intentionally went back to an interview format because, again, I like the different kinds of content, and I feel like you can learn different things from each of them. So I enjoy doing that. And, I've always considered myself a content creator and curator in that I do create a lot of content myself, and I share that, but I love sharing other people's content as well, and I love learning from others.
And we've certainly seen that. And speaking of content, I remember dating back to CCW Nashville a few months back. I remember when you delivered a speech that I've captured some of the audio from and have written different articles about. The crowd was blown away with the presentation. And in the speech, you specifically mentioned something along the lines of how remarkable CX can be your biggest marketing differentiator. Can you share some of those examples or best practices on how this can be the case for many brands today, especially as we all kind of navigate through the current and aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Absolutely. I mean, we've all seen the statistics as marketers that when other people are saying nice things about us, it is so much more authentic and credible than when we're saying nice things about ourselves. I'd love to tell you that I'm an awesome keynote speaker, but I'd really love to have somebody else tell you that instead, right? Because it's going to sound a lot better. And so what I have found after being a marketer for 20 plus years and managing pretty much every marketing channel there is other than television is that the single best way to market your customer is to have other people do it. And in order to do that, you have to give them experiences that they want to talk about. And the truth is that most experiences that we have with brands are what my millennial friends call meh. They're so-so, they're average. And nobody talks about an average experience. So we have an opportunity to take an average experience and just make it above average. It doesn't have to be unbelievable, shooting off fireworks, spending millions of dollars. It just has to stand out by not being meh. And so when that happens, the research says that consumers are actually more willing to share positive experiences with their friends, with their family, on social media than they are negative experiences. It's just that we don't have enough positive experiences to share. And that's why when we think about what gets shared, especially on social, we tend to think about the negative experiences. My belief is if you can shift 80% of that meh experience over to positive, now you're giving your customers experiences that they want to tell other people about, and thus they become your best marketers.
Whether they're positive or negative experiences, online reviews in different social media platforms, whether it's Twitter, LinkedIn, now TikTok, and some more emerging social media platforms are certainly a viable option that customers turn to when they want to share a negative or positive experience. And Dan, in 2017, you published Winning at Social Customer Care, where you kind of touched on some of these topics. Can you share some of the key lessons addressed in the book?
Absolutely. Yeah. Winning at Social Customer Care introduced the concept of customer experience and why it's important and where social media specifically fits within it. And I go into the 8 steps to winning at social customer care, which have to do with everything from creating a philosophy that your company follows around what you want to be in social media and what your brand voice should be like, to hiring and training agents that are different from agents than we've hired and trained before, because no longer is just a telephone experience important, but we need to make sure that they're good writers, for example, that they have some idea of public relations, because they are going to be the public face of the company each and every time they respond to people. And so it's really a how-to manual for getting yourself up and running in social media on the customer service side. Because again, when I ran social media teams on the marketing side, the first thing I realized was this is a different kind of marketing channel. It's the only channel in which customers can talk back. And that's what makes it unique and so powerful. So I wanted to focus on the engagement piece, not so much the how much content can we throw at people or how loud of a megahorn can we have to, scream our message at people. So, and now I'm actually working on book number 2, which I'm super excited about, and I'm about 85% done as we're recording today. And that's really going to go through the model that I introduced everybody to at CCW Nashville, which is my methodology for creating these positive experiences, and all of the examples that I have of different companies that have been doing that. And then it'll actually go into, which the keynotes don't, it'll go into implementing and how do you actually make this happen at your company, especially if you're in a big company and you sort of feel like you're the only one who's interested in improving the customer experience, and you got all this red tape and legal department and executives that aren't paying attention and stuff. Like, how do you navigate through all of that? I've been there. I did that in corporate America. So I'm trying to share those learnings as well.
Well, I'm sure I'm not the only one that's thinking we can't wait to read that. So Dan, I'm currently working on some different reports and articles. It's certainly not a book at this point in time, but some of these topics cover the future of e-commerce and some of the consumer behavior trends that are going on right now and how e-commerce is surging, the expedited process of customer service technology, whether it's social media or it's something like different channels like chatbots or IVR, et cetera. And then of course the surge of social media traffic that we're talking about. Why is social media really becoming increasingly popular in that customer service and customer experience world rather than strictly a digital marketing piece?
Well, first of all, Matt, you are a publishing powerhouse. You do a lot of great stuff, and I'll bet if you look back at all the stuff you've written, you've got a whole bunch, a good portion of a book already written, and you don't even know it. So keep up the good work there. On social, I think when social first came out, it was a customer service channel of last resort. So I called and they put me on hold for an hour, or I emailed and they never got back to me, or the chat function wasn't available on the website. So now I'm really angry, and now I want to take it out on the company, and I want to tell everybody about it and really embarrass the organization. And I think what happened over time was that a lot of people figured out that social was a really great channel to get service from. And it was fast, it was easy, and generally reliable. And so for a lot of people, I think social media became the channel of first resort. And that was the big shift. Number one is that you now had people that when they needed help from a company, social's where they went to first. The second titanic shift that has happened recent, in the last, I would say, year or so, is that now there's this move to messaging. And that is part social because obviously we have Facebook Messenger and we have Twitter DMs, et cetera, Instagram DMs. But it also includes other chat categories, even like SMS. And you mentioned chat bots, and so it brings technology into it. And what we're finding is that the trend is absolutely that that's where customers are going. And the good news is that brands seem to like that because after all, it takes the complaints out of a public space and puts them into a private space. And I have found personally when people ask me like, Dan, how do you get what you want from companies? I go to Twitter DM first because I think that the companies appreciate that I'm not trying to embarrass them publicly, that I really am trying to get assistance. And I love it because of the asynchronous nature of it, right? So the whole history of my conversation with them going back months or years is right there. So if I gave them my loyalty number, 8 months ago, they don't have to ask me again because there it is. It's right there in the chat session, just like in your SMS on your phone, you've got every text you've ever sent your spouse or your boyfriend or girlfriend. And so that becomes a really positive experience for the user because we know the number one complaint that customers have about service is having to repeat themselves. And so now you don't have to do that anymore because all the information's already there. It's also convenient. I can post my question and then leave and just go about my day and check back later when it's convenient for me. I don't have to wait for somebody to pick up. I don't have to stare at a screen where it says agent typing for 5 minutes. I just leave and I come back when it's convenient and then I continue the conversation. So that's the other really big shift that's happening. And I think customers love this. And I think you're going to start seeing more and more companies offer, push people towards messaging, even SMS, because it's how we naturally communicate with each other. And you don't have to teach people how to use it. It's commonly accepted and it's natural for people. And so it makes sense that it's the next extension of how we communicate with companies.
No, it does. I think there's a lot of great points there. And I particularly like the certain point about self-service and different social media and chat channels kind of combining to ultimately deliver the best in class customer experience. So like you said, when you DM a brand or message a brand, regardless of the channel, the history is usually there depending upon the platform and the agent can see everything that's going on. But I have to ask about some future social media channels in business as well. So are there any that you particularly foresee that you think will necessarily dominate others? Maybe that's Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, obviously the standard ones like Twitter, Instagram. Any that really come to mind that you think will kind of dominate other social media platforms in the near future?
Well, it's an interesting question because if you are using any sort of technology platform to handle your customer service inquiries, which means you're essentially a medium-sized business or bigger, the benefit of all of these chat channels is that to an agent, they basically all look the same, right? An agent doesn't really care whether you're on Facebook Messenger or whether you're texting an SMS. It's the same it's really the same concept. And so that's really good for companies because we can train people once and they can handle all of those channels that you just mentioned. And we can turn on one piece of technology and it can handle all of those channels you just mentioned. As to where customers are going, a little bit hard to say. Clearly on the marketing side, I think a lot of brands are super excited about TikTok. I remain a little skeptical, much as I was always skeptical about Snapchat. And I think, I'm not a guy that says I told you so, but I think I turned out to be right on that it didn't really become a huge marketing channel. I'm not so sure TikTok's going to get there either, but we'll see. And certainly a lot of brands will try and will spend a lot of money trying, and we'll see if anyone gets to the top of the mountain or whether there's really no mountain to climb. But I would say certainly for messaging, I think that Facebook Messenger is probably the biggest in the world for customer service. In the US, Twitter is very big. It's not as much in other countries, not quite as big. And then I think as you can, more recently, Instagram's DMs are now available into some of these technology platforms. I think that will increase the volume there. Although I always tell people two things. One is you only have to be where your customers are. So know where your customers are. And if you don't know, ask them. So when I worked for Humana and we were focused on Medicare Advantage products that are aimed at 65 years old and older, it didn't matter that we weren't on Snapchat, right? Because that's not where grandma and grandpa are. We all know that grandma and grandpa are on Facebook, though. And so it was really important that we were on that channel. So depending on your product or service or your target audience, choose your channel accordingly. And then, also, I think you try to be really, really good at a couple of channels before you try to be everywhere. A lot of companies spread themselves way too thin and they feel like they have to be on every single platform, and they're not good at any of them. And so I always suggest, and I've done this for my own personal brand. I built my personal brand on almost entirely on Twitter, and only in the last 6 months have I started to migrate towards LinkedIn. And that's because that's where I see my customers. That's where I, as a customer experience speaker and coach, the people who are hiring speakers and coaches are on LinkedIn. And so I'm shifting, and I still am very active on Twitter, but I am shifting a lot more content to LinkedIn. Do I have an Instagram account? Yes, I do. I have a couple hundred followers, and I mostly post pictures of my cats in my garden, right? And so it's just not a big channel for me. And I decided early on, I had spent so much time and energy growing a following on Twitter, I didn't want to start over on another platform. Do I have a Snapchat account? Yes, but it's mostly just to make sure my son's not getting into trouble. And so I practice that too. And I think companies would do well to find the channels that are where their customers are, where they can really be good and don't worry about being everywhere.
And I think that's a common mistake that a lot of people make. They think that depending upon their consumer demographics, they're not necessarily paying attention to where their customers really are. They're trying to get on every social media platform and kind of expand their marketing reach and their customer service inquiries and communication on every single channel. And like you said, they're not necessarily good at any single one, but I mean, you give a great personal example of yourself. You yourself are a brand, you are a business, and I've been following you for the past couple of years now, and I've seen you shift some of your content from Twitter to more of a LinkedIn dynamic as well to complement that Twitter audience. And I've seen your following and your reach, and now with the Experience Maker, really grow over time. So I think that's such an interesting point. I remember you sharing some different stories about brands that handled either a public social media complaint or inquiry through a simple yet clever approach. Do any come to mind that our audience can learn a thing or two from?
Yeah, I'll give you two quickly. The first is one from my first book, and it's a company out of Canada called Vega, and they produce plant-based protein powders, and they have a very niche target audience. It's basically high-performance athletes who are also vegans. And what was interesting is when their powder came out, they found that people were on either side of the fence about it. They either really liked the taste of it or thought it was disgusting. Nobody was neutral about it. And so they had this problem. Well, what do we do about all these people that think our product tastes disgusting? And I thought their answer was brilliant. They came out with a series of smoothie recipes that are actually intended to cover up the taste of their own product. And they were successful. They got people who didn't like the taste of their product to buy more because now they knew they could mix it in a smoothie and they wouldn't taste it. That is brilliant, right? And especially when you have a niche audience, and granted, I'm not sure that niche audience had anywhere else to go at the time. There weren't very many vegan protein powders available. Right. But I thought that was really insightful, and this willingness, which we all need to do better of, this willingness to admit when our product is not for everybody or when our product has failings. And I think they did a fantastic job with really spending almost no money to fix that. Another one which I love, which I can't remember if I included this in Nashville or not, but I usually do. There was an episode last year of the hit show This Is Us. And for those that haven't seen it, I won't offer any spoilers, but there's a scene where the main character, Jack, is involved with the antagonist, actually, is a crock pot. And I won't tell you what happened, but let's just say that the next day people were not real happy with the Crock-Pot company. Well, at the time, Crock-Pot did not even have a Twitter handle, and they woke up to thousands of tweets. And they jumped onto Twitter and they started responding, and they were unbelievable at it. And they just had a sense of humor, and they were very empathetic, and they were very engaging. And I show in my keynote an awesome tweet that starts off with basically, I'm never using my crock pot. I'm never making my crock pot chili again. And then Crockpot answers this young lady, and then her very next tweet is, I could never live without my beloved Crockpot, right? So just awesome turnaround. And I think there's lots of examples. I had tons of examples when I worked at Discover that if you just get in there and engage with people, even if they're upset with you, you're likely going to put out that fire, and you're going to turn detractors into advocates. So that's what I recommend first and foremost.
Yeah, the two big things that stood out to me in both examples that you mentioned were, one, having a sense of humor, and two, being empathetic. I think a lot of brands lack that, whether it's from a customer service or a digital marketing standpoint. I think showing that you have a personality and giving that brand a personality is ultimately one of the best marketing and customer service pieces a brand can have. Dan, thanks so much. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. I look forward to doing it again.
All right. Thanks, Matt. I really appreciate you having me on.
As always, this is Matt Wujak, CCW Digital writer and analyst, signing off. Thank you for listening.